how can you unlock the power of brown fat so that you can boost your metabolism naturally? After this episode, you're going to know what foods to eat to speed up your metabolism, whether or not fruits and vegetables are dangerous, and you'll learn about the benefits of intermittent fasting. If you're listening on the Apple Podcasts app or on Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the newest episodes that we have to get you looking and feeling your best. Pumped for y'all to learn from Dr. William Li. Dr. Li is a world-renowned physician, scientist, and New York Times best-selling author, best known for his role as president and medical director of the Angiogenesis Foundation. His work has led to more than 40 FDA-approved therapeutics and devices for cancer, cardiovascular disease, wound healing, and vision loss. Dr. Li examines food as medicine through molecular nutrition, which applies biology and biotechnology to understand not only the components of food, but also how the body responds to what it's fed. For now, it's time to get closer to your best you with Dr. William Li. All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am really excited and honored and humbled to be joined by Dr. William Li. Dr. Li, we're going to jump right into things today. One of the topics that I know I'm most excited to talk about is brown fat, and that's kind of where we're going to start today. I know that there's basically a brief intro is there's white fat and there's brown fat that we have inside of our body. White fat is primarily meant for storage. Brown fat is meant for body temperature regulation, if I understand that correctly. And there are things like cold showers, cold plunges, cold exposure that can turn on and activate brown fat. And then through reading your book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, that I got back here, I learned that there's different foods that you can eat to also activate brown fat inside of our body. First off, just what does activating brown fat actually mean?
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the big idea of fat that most people get wrong. So the idea that we think about on fat is a negative idea, right? Most of us, look, if you go to the grocery store and you wheel your cart, even if you're a vegan, you're going to roll your cart by the meat section. All right, it's going to happen. And if you see a big T-bone steak with a big rind of fat, you go, oh man, I hope nobody eats that. That's disgusting, right? And all of us also associate fat with something we don't want. And this has happened to me, right? You step out of the shower in the morning, right? And you can see out of the corner of your eye, your body. And if you see a lump or a bump that you are not happy with, like, what do? You curse and you go, man, I got to get in better shape. I got to do something about that. And then the next step you do, which is even worse, is you step on the scale. And that number isn't exactly the number you're hoping for. Like, your day is shot. All right. So the basic person's, everyday person's idea of fat is very negative. However, we know that fat can't be all bad for us. And the reason we know that, hardwired, is that there is one situation where when you see fat, you smile, right? Big smile, ear to ear. And that's when you see a baby, right? When you see a baby, like a big chubby baby, like it just brings a big smile to everyone's face. And so while we're hardwired to think of fat as bad, deep inside, we know that there is something valuable about body fat. And that's really where I want to take off to talk about white fat and brown fat. You know, a lot of people don't realize that fat, like many other tissues in our body, is designed for a function. And that function is to exist at a level that is just right, like Goldilocks, not too hard, not too soft, not too hot, not too cold, but just right. We need just the right amount of body fat because our body fat, as you said earlier in the intro, stores energy. All right. So a lot of people don't know this, but fat is like one of the earliest tissues to form in our body. When your mom's egg met your dad's sperm, and we were all a ball of cells, okay? Didn't have a face, didn't have arms or legs yet. We were just forming. The first organs, the first tissue that forms are circulation. Everything needs a circulation. Second tissue that forms are our nerves, because everything needs electrical wiring to function, right? So this is like building a house if you're a contractor. The third tissue that forms is body fat. Now, you don't even have a chin to be double. You don't have a waist to have a muffin top. So for some reason, fat is forming really early. And the early places it forms really amazing. It forms like bubble wrap around your blood vessels, our blood vessels. Now, why does it do that? Well, once I tell you what it does, it's going to make perfect sense to you what fat does. Fat forms like a layer of bubble wrap around our blood vessels because when we eat food, our food is our energy. We call that energy calories. It's kind of like a car, right? You're going to fill up your car with gas, for example. We call it gallons of gas, and we got to store it in our gas tank. Well, our fat is our body's gas tank, and our food is our fuel. It's the petrol we actually load into our tank, right? So where do you want your fuel tanks to be? Right, where the fuel is coming from, right around the blood vessels. And that's why fat is engineered at the very beginning of life to be surrounding our blood vessels. So our fat does grow over a period of time. When we eat, the fuel is stored in our fat cells. And then when we need the energy, we burn it right from our gas tank. Just like when you're actually leaving a filling station, you fill up your tank. That's after you had dinner, or after you're leaving the filling station, when the gas nozzle goes click, you're done, you're filled. And then you go off on your way and you burn down the gas, the fuel. Now, here's what actually is amazing. Most of the fat that gets filled up is called white fat. And we've got two different colors of fat in our body, actually, mostly. Kind of like going, if you ever painted a house, or painted your bedroom, like you're going to go to the paint store and you're going to see all these different colors and you pick out a couple of swatches and then you got to go home. So like, when our bodies were designed and body fat was being kind of like, how are we going to design body fat? It's like going to the paint store. All right. Mother Nature chose a can of white paint and a can of brown paint. All right. And I'm going to tell you why brown in a second. But this is the color of paint that our fat is actually colored. And the fuel is mostly stored in our white fat. Our white fat actually is generally under the skin. All right. That's called subcutaneous. That's the stuff you can see under your chin, under your arms. That's the stuff that people don't want to have in their thighs and their butt too much. That's the muffin top. All right. Now, then there's inside white fat that can be located inside the tube of your body. Like imagine your body like a big sewer tube, right? And there's fat, you've got organs in there, fat's packed in there. That's also white fat. We call that visceral fat. Visceral meaning gut. It's the fat around your gut. And then that's the white fat. Then the brown fat, the color brown. The brown fat is not wiggly, jiggly, or lumpy, bumpy like the white fat is. The brown fat is wafer thin, like a piece of paper. Amazing. And it's not close to the skin. Can't see it. It's pressed close to the bone. In fact, it's underneath the muscle. It's around your strap muscles around your neck, under your breastplate, your breastbone, a little bit between your shoulder blades, and a little bit in your belly. Now, white fat stores energy, stores fuels, your gas, your fuel tank. Brown fat helps you burn that fuel. Now, if you need to be temperature regulated, okay, so let's say you go into a cold plunge, all right, or you go out into the, like some of these people in the Norwegian countries do. In the winter, they just like get naked and they jump right into the icy Arctic, right? Okay, so you're going to do that. You're going to actually get really cold, and your brown fat compensates by firing up like the unit on your, like a gas burner on your kitchen, on your stovetop, right? So what happens when you actually want to boil some soup or something or some water? Put the pot on, you go to your range if you've got gas cooking, and you turn the knob. It goes click, 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 whoosh. Now you got the flame. Now in your kitchen, that flame is drawing gas from your gas line or a gas tank by the side of your house. In your body, when your brown fat goes on to create temperature, like your gas range, click, 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 whoosh, that's the cold plunge, all right? It's going to generate heat. Where's it going to get that fuel from? You don't have a gas tank. Wait, you do. That gas tank is your white fat. So brown fat, to regulate temperature, like in a cold plunge, will draw the fuel to burn to create higher temperature from your white fat, starting with your visceral fat, the fat that's trapped inside the tube of your body. And so this is actually why cold plunges work, to actually help you up your metabolic game. So if you're somebody who's busy and you don't have a lot of time to work out and get a gym and get a trainer and, train for marathons and all that kind of stuff, if you want to do one thing to really trigger your body's hardwired system to help step up your metabolism, burn down some of that extra fuel that's accumulated, not just from last night's dinner, but from last month's dinner and from last year's too much dinner. This is overeating that a lot of us do over the course of our lives. This is why cold plunges actually can be helpful. Now, how do we discover brown fat? This is an amazing story. Brown fat was not discovered in humans. Brown fat was discovered in like the 1800s, and 18th century, by naturalists that were studying hibernating animals, kind of like a woodchuck kind of animal, in Central Europe. So in Central Europe, the mountains are really cold, and the naturalists, you remember, like back in the Darwin day, they would collect animals and they would dissect them, kind of like when we were kids in school, and see what's inside. And they were dissecting these hibernating animals, right? So what happens when an animal hibernates? Well, like in the summer, it's like lean and mean, okay? When in fall and winter comes, it stuffs its face, the big fat cheeks, and you get a lean animal and turns into a big pudgy thing, right? Then it waddles into a cave and it sleeps all winter long. So how come the animals would freeze? Because brown fat turns on. And that's what these early naturalists found when they were dissecting hibernating animals. They found a thing between the shoulder blades that was this big round lump, and they called it a hibernoma. It's this mass that actually is present during hibernation. They had no idea what it did. Okay, fast forward to the early 1900s, like 1930s, scientists at UCLA actually were looking at this hibernoma. Now, by that time, we had really good microscopes. All right, back in when it was like when I told you when dissecting the woodchuck kind of thing, they didn't have really good microscopes. By 1930, we had really good ones. All right, now we have even better ones. But back then, we had some good ones, and they looked into the microscope and they said, "Hey, man, this isn't like a regular organ. It's body fat. It looks exactly like fat, except it's colored brown." So once we discovered that, we realized that in humans, there's also brown fat as well. Babies have it right between their shoulder blades. And then we thought, well, humans don't hibernate, so the brown fat must go away. It's kind of like an appendix or tonsils. We don't need them. Actually, we do. And it turns out that you and I and all the people watching this also have brown fat, but it really only fires up when the weather gets cold. So this brown fat, as you kind of introduced, is our secret weapon against body fat. But you don't have to inject yourself with anything. You don't have to work yourself out. Our body naturally has this hardwiring to be able to burn fat. So my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, it's not a diet book. It's an anti-diet book because it talks about how do you use what we're equipped with already without extras to be able to actually combat the things that we want to combat when it comes to metabolism and up our game when it comes to our health.
Yeah, I love it. And I want to get to some of the particular foods that help turn on brown fat at some point, but I want to still kind of dive in on the cold exposure and brown fat. And so, for example, before actually hopping on this interview, took a shower and finished like with 2 minutes of as cold as possible. Obviously, certain showers can only go to a certain level of cold. This one goes pretty cold, but like, what does the science show when it comes to how long does brown fat get turned on? And how long does that persist post cold plunge or post cold shower? Like how long does the increased burning of white fat continue after a bout of cold exposure?
It's a great question because there is sort of environmental cold versus attack cold. When you turn your temperature in your shower to cold, that's an attack. All right.
Yeah.
When you jump into a cold plunge pool, that's an attack on your body. But you can also go out into the wintertime. You go skiing. You take off your walk outside without a jacket. That's environmental cold. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is that our body is perfectly designed to counter attacks, and then it will compensate slowly when the environment around us changes. So when you actually turn that cold shower on, all right, just like everything else kind of like reacts and shrivels up, okay, basically your brown fat will actually turn on, boom, lickety split. It goes on. Just like in a cold plunge, I mean, literally within a couple of minutes, you got your brown fat firing. All right. It is trying to protect your core temperature. That core temperature, if it stays, if it's allowed to go too cold, I mean, that's it. You're toast. Like you will not survive. And so this is part of our survival mechanism. Okay. Come out of a cold plunge or turn off your shower and you step out and you dry yourself off. All right. Your body will warm up by itself pretty quickly, right? Because number one, you're in room temperature. Number two, you're taking some of the cold water off. So you start warming up. And so the brown fat will then shut down pretty fast. That's the attack on and attack off, right? Okay. Now, on the other hand, if you're actually, let's say in the Northeast and you're camping, right? During the daytime, it might be warm. Or let's go to the desert where the temperatures are really extreme. You're camping in a desert, okay? Joshua National, the Joshua Tree National Park. You're actually there, and in the daytime it's really hot, so you don't need any extra temperature. But then at night, what actually happens is that the temperature drops and your environment starts to cool off. Now, what you want to do is now your body temperature is going to evaluate. That's still kind of an attack, but it's happening more slowly. It's not instantaneous. There's like a thermostat in your body will say, it's kind of cooling down. Let's kind of turn on some of the heat. Don't forget, you're not shivering yet. That's the key thing. Shivering is muscle that's like vibrating, okay, and twitching in order to generate heat. That's like an extreme form of like rescue. But actually, brown fat will turn on. Now, let's say you're going from summer to fall to winter. Now you're talking about days to weeks, even to months before it starts cooling off. When that actually happens, what you're actually getting is something pretty unique because now your brown fat is going to start turning on more regularly until you actually get that warm. Your temperature is generally regulated. So, how we discovered brown fat in humans and human adults actually came in the 1990s. There was a patient who came in with a tumor in her chest. And was at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, and she got a scan. Now, you can do an MRI scan or a CT scan, look for a mass for cancer. They thought she had cancer. Around that time, they had something called a PET scan that picks up metabolism. All right. And when they did a PET scan on her, that little mass lit up like a Christmas tree. All right. High metabolism. Right. So they biopsied to say, what is it? What kind of tumor is it? And when they looked under the microscope, remember the microscope hides nothing. When they looked under the microscope, they're like, OMG, this isn't a cancer. It is a tumor made out of fat. And in fact, when they looked at the color, it was brown fat. It was lighting up under the PET scan. All right. So that was actually a fat tumor that actually happened. And then the people that were doing the research on this said, wait a minute. How come we haven't seen this before in our PET scans to pick up high metabolism? Remember, brown fat ups your metabolic game. All right. So then they're saying, well, let's look at thousands of scans. When they looked at thousands of scans, and they found some people had some brown fat and some people didn't have brown fat. And they're like, I don't know, maybe this is an artifact, but this is what good scientists do. They don't let confusion get in the way of trying to get clarity. So then they started to sort the data. And they realized something really important is that the people whose brown fat lit up on the PET scan pretty reliably were all getting their PET scans in the winter months in Massachusetts.
Wow.
All right. Cold weather lit up their brown fat. The ones who didn't have brown fat, guess what? They were all getting their scans in the spring and summertime. Amazing, right? So our body sort of has this thermostat that leverages our muscles, our brown fat, to make sure our core temperature is actually doing well. And just like a hibernating animal, even though we don't have to crawl into caves anymore, most of us don't, the bottom line is that we still have brown fat that is to our advantage. However, that brown fat is around. And when you do cold plunges or cold showers, all right, or as you're alluding to, and what I did my research on for the book, is that there are certain foods that can fire up your brown fat. So you get that extra boost of fat burning, fuel burning, even when the weather is actually pretty temperate.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now I'm interested to stay on the temperature side of things. if you said that people's brown fat was lighting up when they were getting their PET scans in the winter, I think oftentimes like we discussed beforehand, I'm from Atlanta, live in Nashville, so I'm in the South. It's always pretty warm. And when it gets below 40 degrees here, we're like, oh my gosh, it's absolutely freezing. And then when people up north just laugh at us when it's like, that's just normal for them. Do people up north, just generally speaking, have more brown fat in their body than maybe people who live in the South? Is that a thing?
You know what? It's probably that the people in the north have brown fat that's lit up more often because the weather is generally colder. But people's thermostats reset, right? So just because you live in Arizona or Florida doesn't mean that you don't use your brown fat. But, because your temperature resets and then it's relatively cool to you, right? So if you're from the southeast, right, it's pretty warm most of the time, but relatively, like somebody in the northeast, like I'm from New England. Look, something that might be cold to you, it's not cold to me, right? You hear this from California people all the time. Oh man, right. It's freezing. Yeah, not that cold.
Yeah, it's like 50 degrees. Get over it. That's awesome. So let's hear some of those foods that light up your brown fat and turn on brown fat and increase your metabolism.
All right. Well, so I study food as medicine. I'm a researcher. Scientist, and I'm also a medical doctor, and I'm internal medicine. So I take care of men and women, young and old, healthy and sick. And I'm always really interested in, what does food do to activate our body's health defenses to be healthier? In other words, not just what are the magic foods. Like there's so many ads out there that talk about like superfood this, super supplement that. Look, you know what? To me, that's the wrong point of view. What's really super is our body. That's really Mother Nature is amazing how she designed everything. But our bodies are remarkably designed. And what's the real question you want to ask is how does our body respond to what you put inside it? And as it relates to brown fat, the question you're asking is what are some of the foods that cause your body to respond by turning on brown fat? Surprisingly, right? So here are some surprises. Turns out that strawberries turn on brown fat. Okay. Strawberries, which is a summer food, right? You eat the strawberry, there's something called ellagic acid inside. Ellagic acid is what makes strawberries tart, right? A good strawberry is kind of sweet and tart at the same time. Got some dietary fibers, got some vitamin C, some good stuff for your body. But with the tartness, it's called ellagic acid. And ellagic acid, when you eat it, it goes down to your stomach, absorbs your bloodstream, and guess what it does? It starts to turn on your brown fat. And in fact, studies have been done in humans looking at strawberries, the equivalent of about a cup of ripe strawberries, all right, that then get dehydrated into a powder and then mix into a drink. So the researchers were able to measure the exact amount of strawberries that people are having. But it's really a cup of ripe strawberries. Basically, you have it every single day for like 6 weeks. And you know what they found? They found that it turns on brown fat, and it also that brown fat shrinks down the visceral fat that's in the tube of your body. Doesn't matter if you're a big body or small body, we're all tubes, and that visceral fat in there burn down the fuel. And you know what happens? Waist size shrinks, waist circumference shrinks. If you don't have a DEXA scan, which is used by health and fitness people to kind of measure different types of tissues in the body, a good surrogate, kind of a poor man's DEXA scan, is simply your belt loop. Because if you're actually able to tighten your belt loop one notch, that means that your waist circumference has shrunk, right? Pants are a little looser. You put one more hole in there in order to be able to keep my pants up. That's actually a measure of your visceral fat. So think about it. Your tube, stretchy, because it's just our human body, right? The spine is solid, but the tube is stretchy. You're growing a lot of visceral fat in the middle there. What are you going to do? You're going to stretch it out. And now your belt's going to have to be a little wider. You shrink down that visceral fat, the tube gets smaller. Now the belt's a little tighter. So just remember that your belt is actually a poor man's DEXA scan to give you a sense of how much visceral fat you're burning. By the way, the beer gut, so there's things like alcohol, lots of carbs. Beer gut is really a lot of visceral fat growing. And the reason that the beer gut is pooching over, right? First it expands your waist, then it grows like an avalanche over your belt. All right, now your belt can't even contain it anymore. That's really not just muffin top. All right, muffin top's under the skin. Beer gut is actually pooching out from the inside out.
And you can tell when when the gut, it's not just flabby, it's hard, right?
Yeah, it's firm. It's firm. It's basically
Firm.
like it's basically like your recyclable grocery sack that you stuffed with everything you got into it. The whole thing is like firm and tense, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we got strawberries. What are like four more?
Oh yeah, sure. Mushrooms, and let's not. I'm going to separate mushrooms for a second into medicinal mushrooms versus culinary mushrooms. All right, like the stuff you get in a regular grocery store, culinary mushrooms, portobello, white button mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms. You occasionally you'll see some fancier ones. Those are culinary mushrooms you use to eat them. They're used for cooking. Now you got the fancier mushrooms that people are talking about and using now. The lion's mane and turkey tail, reishi mushrooms. Those are medicinal mushrooms. I want to focus on the culinary mushrooms because those are the ones that are inexpensive. Anybody can have them. And you don't need to know anything special to cook with a mushroom, right? Mushrooms have dietary fiber and they have a bioactive called beta-D-glucan. Now, beta-D-glucan, for those of you who want to geek out on this kind of stuff, is itself a soluble fiber. When you eat a mushroom, okay, even though it doesn't taste stringy like broccoli, which also has fiber, the mushroom's soft. You chew it up and swallow it. That soluble fiber feeds your gut microbiome. All right. And then a happy gut microbiome makes your metabolism much more efficient. All right. It can also turn on some of your brown fat, but the beta glucan, when it's absorbed into your body, will trigger your brown fat. So what happens when you trigger your brown fat? It's like going to the gas range. Click, 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 whoosh. Now, once that fire turns on, which can happen literally within half an hour after eating a meal with mushrooms or berries, for example, when we talk more about more foods, immediately that burner, the brown fat, has got to draw that fuel someplace, right? You don't get fire for nothing, right? You need a cord of wood in order to burn a bonfire, right? And you need gas to be able to get your gas range working. Brown fat, when it actually generates heat, to burn it down, it needs to draw that fuel down, and it does an honest man's job of drawing that fuel down from your white fat, right? So this is an amazing way to kind of trim yourself from the inside out. It actually the burning starts from the inside. It draws it closer to the center of your body, all right, first. So that's one of the things that you can do with mushrooms. Now, I got to tell you something. How you cook does matter, right? So if you're frying your mushrooms, all right, now you're loading more carbs or eating the mushrooms. You're burning some stuff, but now you're loading more in there. If you are cooking in butter, I mean, look, mushrooms and butter, it's a good mix if you like eating, tastes nice. But how you cook can make a difference. Now, you want to saute a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of shallots, some thyme, and some herbs. Slice up your mushrooms and maybe saute it. Okay, cook it with an omelet, for example. Now you're actually talking about adding ingredients or cooking with ingredients, olive oil that has bioactives that turn on your brown fat. So if you actually want to saute some mushrooms, olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, it's got hydroxytyrosol, it's got oleocanthal. These are other bioactives in olive oil that turn on your brown fat. Now you got the mushrooms that turn it on with beta-glucan. Now you got the olive oil that turn it on with the hydroxytyrosol and the oleocanthal. So you see what I'm saying is that the food is one thing. You can pick it out in the produce section, but how you cook with it makes a difference because you're not loading those harmful extra calories on in the same way that if you're deep frying or cooking with butter.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Awesome stuff there. We've talked about brown fat a ton, which is awesome because it's super valuable and I love it. And I actually want to stay on it one more thing, and then we'll finish off talking about anti-nutrients and maybe debunking some things that some people say out there. But the way that I want to finish off the brown fat conversation is from my perspective, when it comes to like being in a energy deficit, if you will, if somebody's looking to lose body fat and being in an energy deficit, when it comes to energy expenditure, I usually have learned that total daily energy expenditure is broken up into your basal metabolic rate, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, your exercise activity thermogenesis, and your thermic effect of food. When it comes to these foods that turn on brown fat, and when it comes to cold exposure that turns on brown fat, what is that doing? Is that increasing our basal metabolic rate for that particular day, and then it's just like maybe a little bit for that day, and just if you continue these particular habits and eating these foods, that just over time it creates just a little bit more energy deficit than you would typically otherwise do.
Yeah, so I think that the what you just framed is actually really correct. You got to put fuel into your body, and then your body's got different ways of burning down the fuel. Basal metabolic rate is really just to be alive, for you not to be dead. All right. If you're not a corpse and you're living, even if you're in a coma, all right, just to be alive, your organs functioning, you're going to need some energy just to keep things going. All right. That's basal metabolic rate. Everything else we talked on top of that, okay, activating your brown fat, the cold plunge, the foods that activate your brown fat, all those things are on top of the basal rate. They don't
Okay.
increase the basal rate, but they add on top of it. Okay. Now, how much you move, what you do, how many steps you walk, how fast you breathe, those things all will add up to increasing energy expenditure. But it's balanced based on how much fuel you're actually putting into your tank, right? So think about it. If you're driving the car, right? Think about it. You are gaining mileage and you're making progress forward at the same time that you're burning down fuel. Now, if you stop all the time to fill up your tank, just to the top of the tank, you're tanked up. You're going to be able to go pretty far that way, all right? But if you keep on filling up the tank, or you get some extra jerry cans of gas and load them into your trunk, for those of you who drive gasoline cars still, all right, the bottom line is that you're going to wind up actually having more fuel in your body than you're actually burning. You can go a little bit longer, but you got extra fuel. And this is actually what like in the body, we're not exactly constructed like a car where you've got a rigid steel gas tank. Our fuel tank, our body fat, can stretch. In fact, a single fat cell can stretch about 300 times in its size, right? It's like a water balloon. So, when I went to medical school, we were taught by the time you're born, you got all the fat that you're ever going to have. It just gets bigger. We now know that's not really true. You can create more fat cells, all right? And we got stem cells that create more fat cells. So you can really grow a lot. But think about it this way. You're eating, you're using some of the fuel just to digest your food. Anything extra gets stored in your fat. The fat cell will get bigger and bigger. Okay, the more you eat, the more it gets bigger. All right. Now you're overeating. Now it's going to get really big. You're still eating. Now it's going to fill up another fat cell, and it's going to fill that up to the brim. And you're still eating. You're having thirds and fourths. Now it's going to fill up again. Now you're going to go off and you're going to sleep on the couch, and you're going to get up and eat again. And now it's going to fill up more and more fat. This is basically how you accumulate unwanted body weight, by having too much fuel, too many calories in your body that you're not burning away. All right. Now, here's the thing about fat. You can make more fat. Eventually the fat itself, the fuel, will spill out of the fuel tank. Now, what happens in a car when you overload your fuel tank? I mean, it's happened to all of us, right? You put the nozzle in the gas tank and you press the button, it's filling it up, not paying attention. If you're in one of those old school gas stations where there isn't a clicker that automatically stops, what happens is you can easily overfill your tank, right? Dangerous, right? If you didn't have that clicker, you fill it up. That's like a fat getting all full. Your tank's full. What happens? Gas fills over the side of the tank, runs down the side of the tires, pools around your shoes. Now you're standing in a dangerous, toxic, flammable mess, right? Really bad. Same deal with fat. If we overeat, that fat will spill out. Our fuel will spill out of our fat cells eventually. Where do they go? They go to our liver. And what does it do to our liver? Our liver tries to detoxify it. It grows up. It gets fatty because it's accumulating fat. And you've heard about non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This is how it happens, by overeating. And that's why, by the way, I'm a medical doctor, so I can tell you about this. Liver transplant used to come from hepatitis. They use most common hepatitis and alcoholism, right? People who are drinkers, they screw up their liver, get hepatitis, it causes liver failure. That's when you need to have liver transplant. Don't have a lot of livers to go around. So a lot of people are winding up dying of liver disease. Turns out now it's not alcoholism and it's not hepatitis. It is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's overeating that loads up the liver with fat. That is the number one cause for the reason to have a liver transplant today. So we've even
Mm.
changed the demographics of what does this heroic measure, okay, by overeating. So I just gave you the idea of the fuel tank leaking, and that leakage actually it causes inflammation in the body as well, right?
Yeah.
Because when the fat's growing, it outstrips its blood supply, bigger, bigger, bigger. The center of the fat is choking because the fat is so big, it doesn't have enough blood flow. It's called hypoxia. It's like, a free diver that can't get up fast enough really starts to struggle. And when the body starts to struggle for oxygen, when the fat starts to struggle for oxygen in the center of your body, it draws in inflammatory cells. And that's why overeating, having too many calories, growing too much body fat over a period of time leads to not only liver disease, not only a bigger body size, but it also leads to inflammation in your fat. And when your fat is inflamed, especially the visceral fat, the kind that's stuck in the middle of the tube of your body, a lot of visceral fat, it's like a baseball glove of fat that wraps around your organs. Now, strike a match, light it on fire. Now you've got an inflammatory visceral fat. That is a setup for really bad disease.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very, very informative. I think that's so interesting to find out how now that the biggest reason for liver transplants now isn't even hepatitis or alcoholism. It's actually just from overeating and just over consuming on calories for too long of a period of time. Anti-nutrients. I feel like it's probably popularized from the carnivore diet becoming more and more popular. But people talk about anti-nutrients specifically from like fruits and vegetables and other grains and things like that. Things like lectins, phytates, oxalates, tannins. And are these things that we actually need to be concerned about when it comes to our fruits and vegetables? Is there any validity? Is there validity to maybe like some people are more affected by them for some reasons than other people? Talk to me about if there's any validity around that conversation of anti-nutrients and particularly fruits and vegetables and grains and things.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. Okay. There are so many voices out there talking about health and wellness, especially when it comes to nutrition, that the sea of information and the volume of noise that's out there is deafening. And one of the things that I like to do is to bust myths. Like I'm like an MMA fighter when it comes to myths. Put me in the octagon and I will chase that thing down like Conor McGregor. All right, and so here's the thing. There is no such thing as an anti-nutrient. That's a made up term. All right. Like just like there's like no such thing as a Terminator. All right. I mean, somebody made up the term, it stuck, and then people quote it. And what I find really difficult is when I hear credible people starting to quote terms that came up from people who had no business other than being creative coming up with it. There are nutrients. Okay. And these are bioactives, natural chemicals that are found in our foods and our body. And when we eat them, our body responds to them. Those are beneficial. And there are toxins and synthetic chemicals and preservatives and artificial flavoring, artificial sweeteners, artificial substances that preservatives that actually will damage our body's health defenses. Our body will react in negative ways. But there's no such thing as an anti-nutrient that basically gets into your body, kind of like, like a stormtrooper in Star Wars that actually starts to fight with the nutrients. There's no such thing as nutrients and anti-nutrients. It's a complete wet dream that's not true. It's not the one you want to have, okay, no matter who you are. It's fake. It's false. It's a term that doesn't belong, all right? So let me just tell you that most of the people come up with this stuff are well-intentioned, all right? So let's pick out lectins that you said. Lectins are a natural substance that holds tissue together. In fact, you got tons of lectins in your body, and I've got tons of lectins in your body. If we didn't have lectins, we'd fall apart, all right? We'd be like the Wicked Witch of the West after you pour water on her, in that old movie, you just turn into a puddle. You need lectins to stick together. And foods also have lectins in it. Tomatoes have lectins, fruits have lectins. Guess what? There are poisonous lectins. The foods that we eat don't have any of them. All right. So we're not talking. But somebody who's well-intentioned read about a poison lectin a lectin that's poisonous, and then saw that foods have lectins, and then just kind of connected them. So I give credit to people who are well intentioned trying to put things together, but it's not true. That's fake. So lectins are totally fine in all the foods that we eat. Think about it. Thousands of years of culinary practices. There isn't something that just happened, 3 years ago, on TikTok that suddenly made it valid, and you invalidate 10,000 years of human consumption. Lectins are fine. All right. Phytates are present in some foods at super high levels. They're kind of toxic. Like beans will have some phytates. Soak the beans, cook the beans, you dissolve the phytates, you're fine. All right. Nobody's going out eating, crunching on beans, raw, dried beans. That doesn't happen. There's a reason it doesn't happen, right? Okay. I'm trying to think of other things that the other ideas of anti-nutrients that have come up. Phytoestrogens, the whole idea in soy, edamame. Oh, don't eat edamame if you're a woman because it can actually cause breast cancer. Again, an urban legend, not true. Soy has lots of important bioactives that actually not only don't cause breast cancer, actually fight breast cancer. The plant estrogen looks nothing like the human estrogen. How does the human body respond? When you eat soy, edamame, tofu, soy milk, drink soy milk, your body actually responds by binding onto the soy version of plant estrogen, and it blocks human estrogen. All right, so actually it's beneficial. And at the end of the day, all you got to do is look at what's really happening in the real population. Are people dying of eating beans or tomatoes? No. Now we look at clinical trials. Clinical trials of tomatoes, clinical trials of beans, clinical trials of soy. Guess what? They actually show, study after study, that people live longer, healthier, and better. So again, I totally appreciate the fact that, there are curious people trying to put facts together, but this is where real science matters. And so the reason that I like to step out and talk about myths is because I'm a real scientist, and I work with this kind of stuff, and I know the differences, and then the God is always in the details. So let's take a look at, most of these urban legends are also based in there's some kernel of truth to them somewhere. There's some aspect that's probably true a bit, but then it gets distorted and then put together and then broadcast out, and it scares people. Yeah. So no such thing as an anti-nutrient.
Well, I appreciate you dispelling that myth. It's good for people to zoom out, have perspective, and think like, have I seen people been dying from beans? Have I seen people been dying from lettuce? Like, no. Keeping perspective on that is really important. Last thing, if you've got a little bit more time that I would love to ask you about is fasting. I know you're a proponent of fasting. And is there such thing basically as too much fasting? I know that sometimes a chronic thing for people who are well-intended and looking to be really, really healthy is undereating and over-exercising and continually doing that over a long period of time, therefore kind of like really, really, really slowing things down when it comes to their metabolism. Is there such thing as too much fasting when it comes to like doing a lot of fasting over an extended period of time, or is there no such thing as that?
Yeah, I mean, the extremes of almost everything when it comes to your metabolism are not good for you. So the answer to your question directly, point blank, is yes, there is such a thing as too much fasting. It's called starving to death in the desert because you ran out of fuel. All right. Now think about it, right? You're not eating, your body's gonna consume itself. And until you become a skeleton, and then they'll find your bones someplace, dried up like the horns of a steer that died in the desert. That's too much. All right. But I will tell you that it's all continuum. The continuum is that we do fast every single day. What does fasting mean? Fasting is a term that refers to not eating. When are we not eating? When we're sleeping. Most of us sleep. All of us should be sleeping every night or some part of during every 24 hours. When we're sleeping, we're not eating. When we're not eating, we're fasting. So when we're sleeping, we're fasting, right? So every single day, every single one of us, when we go to bed, we embark on intermittent fasting as a natural part of sleeping. What happens when you're sleeping and not eating and fasting? Well, it's your metabolism shifts gears. So when I say shifting gears, I want you to imagine your body like a race car. You're a Formula One car. All right. And now when you're eating, you're in a race, you're getting fuel, and your body's like, okay, we're going to burn fuel now. We're going to get, or sorry, we're going to load up on fuel because we need that to be high performance, right? So basically during the day when you're eating, your body's in high performance mode and it wants to store as much fuel as possible. When you're sleeping, your metabolism shifts gears, okay, and says, oh, guess what? We're not eating anymore. We're not getting any more fuel. Let's start burning away any extra fuel that's there. All right. And so basically, when we're sleeping and we're not eating and we're fasting intermittently because we're sleeping only for 8 hours a night, all right, we are actually using that sleeping time, fasting time, to shift metabolic gears to start burning down extra fuel. That's right. We burn fat without exercise when we're sleeping. That's an important thing to understand. Our metabolism goes up when we're actually sleeping. It doesn't go down. When we're sleeping, we think we're inactive. You're on a pillow, sprawled out, lazy bum. You're not doing anything wrong. Your body is doing a lot of stuff. All right. And one of the things it does, it's actually burning down extra fuel in your body. So intermittent fasting, that's why, by the way, intermittent fasting works for weight loss. And intermittent fasting, when you're not putting calories in and the gear shifted, you're also resetting your gut microbiome, which is then lowering inflammation, which is then improving your immune system. There's a kind of a domino effect of good things that happen when you're intermittent fasting. So let's talk about the trend of intermittent fasting. Ye old 16 and 8, 16 of not eating, right, of fasting, and then squeezing all your eating in 8 hours. Look, that works. Don't eat for 16 hours. You want to be really disciplined about it, and you're going to be fasting a lot, all right? And then you're eating only within 8 hours. Now, that works, of course, when you're eating, if you're eating a healthy diet. If you spend whatever time you're eating junk, you're loading all the bad stuff in your body, and your body's going to burn away, fuel, but then you're left with a residue of all the junk. It's like putting poor quality fuel in your car. Once in a while, no biggie. You do it every single day, day in and day out, week in and week out. Man, your car is going to be suffering big time. Car's not going to last. Engine's not going to last a long time. That's why the quality of fuel that you put in while you're doing intermittent fasting, quality of food matters a great deal. So if you 16 and 8 burns fat, guess what? Clinical styles have shown if you 12 and 12, that burns fat too. All right. So 12 and 12 actually works. Arguably, 12 and 12 is more practical because I cannot eat for 12 hours. All right. And then I can eat for 12 hours. I can fit that in my day pretty easily. 16 hours of not eating, if I try to squeeze all my eating in 8 hours, I might be able to do it for a week or two if I was like really focused on it. But for most of us who, live real lives, other things going on, that's really hard to squeeze all your eating in 8 hours. Anything that you want to do for lifelong fitness, you got to be able to keep up over a long period of time. Now, if you let's go beyond 16 hours. Let's say you're fasting, not eating anything for a day, a water diet, okay, a water fast, or 2 days or 3 days. You can't keep up that very long, but you will actually keep losing weight, and you will start to reset and reset and reset until basically your body goes, all right, come on, guys, we're not getting anything in. This is ridiculous. And then it goes, you know what? We're done. We're going to start digesting the body now to get energy. And that's where you go from healthy fasting to too much fasting to starvation, right? Now you're like basically in the desert again, like that, like nothing but skeletons. So yes, you can overdo it, but 12 and 12 is a perfectly reasonable way and a healthy way that's sustainable to have intermittent fasting.
Yeah. Well, then last question on the topic. Sorry. I've got an expert in front of me. I gotta take advantage of this and everybody else too. So, what do you say to somebody who says that, yes, intermittent fasting works for fat loss, but just because it's a way to get into a calorie deficit? Is it just because you're eating less that allows you to lose body fat, or is it the actual timing of it? Or is it the actual length of time that you're not eating that helps you to actually lose body fat, even in addition to the fact, like if calories were equal and you were fasting versus you weren't fasting, will you lose more body fat if you're fasting or not?
So if all calories are equal and you had one group that were eating the same amount of calories but fasting less, the group that's fasting longer would actually lose more weight. All right. But it's not just the weight. It's also all the other benefits, because when you're intermittently fasting, remember, your metabolism is shifting gears and other things are resetting in your body. So
Right.
fasting and lowering calorie restriction, restricting your calories, lowering calories, good for your gut microbiome, reset your healthy gut bacteria. That has a domino effect on so many other good parts of your body, lowering inflammation, boosting your immune system, helping your circulation, text messaging your brain so you're in a better mood. So there's lots of things that actually happen, not just weight loss.
Gotcha. That's great. That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing so much. You guys need to make sure you go get his book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. I finished it just a couple days ago. Amazing stuff. So many great so much practical advice in there with different foods, different recipes that you can start to implement into your lifestyle to burn what we talked about all day long, to light up that brown fat so you can turn your white fat. So I hope you guys took notes on that. Hope you took notes on the anti-nutrients, on the fasting and everything like that. You also need to make sure you go follow him on Instagram at Dr. William Li. And then you can also go visit his website, drwilliamli.com. Is there any other good place where people should go learn more about you and check your workout?
Yeah, check out my YouTube channel, because I actually just launched a brand new series. I'm putting lots of deep dive content on all the questions that people are sending me all the time. And so it's a great place to actually get additional resource information and insights.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you guys need to make sure you go learn from this guy, because he's not just somebody who is trying to get likes and shares and stuff like that. He actually has research and backs up every single thing that he says, which I know I like and respect and really appreciate when I'm searching out for education myself. So appreciate your time today, Dr. Li. This was absolutely awesome. You guys make sure you go follow him on Instagram, follow him on YouTube, and ask him questions so he can maybe answer some of your questions on his channel, and go get Eat to Beat Your Diet. But other than that, that's all we got today, Dr. Li. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate being on.
That interview was amazing. I mean, so insightful. If you're on Spotify or on the Apple Podcast app, make sure you hit follow. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe right now. We're continuing to put out some of the most life-changing and health-changing content out there to help you achieve your health and fitness goals. So make sure you hit like and subscribe and follow. My 3 biggest takeaways from Dr. Li today are the following. Number 1, by finding ways to continually turn on our brown fat through things like cold exposure, through things like eating strawberries, mushrooms, and extra virgin olive oil, we have the ability to burn the harmful white fat inside of our body naturally without doing something like exercise. Visceral fat, number 2. Visceral fat is one of the leading indicators to all sorts of diseases. The reason why visceral fat can build up is through excessive eating day after day, week after week, and year after year. So make sure you monitor your visceral fat levels as you go throughout your life. And then third and finally, anti-nutrients. Yeah, not really a thing, Dr. William Li says. He kind of dispels the myth that fruits and vegetables can be dangerous because of these so-called anti-nutrients. Now, if you can turn on your brown fat, if you can keep inflammation low in the body and manage both the quantity and the quality of your food intake, you'll be well on your way to the healthiest version of yourself and ultimately closer and closer to your best you.